Hi, Taylor. I'm very glad you're here. Thank you for bearing with us, and also the others. I see Marie-Claire sended hearts. I'm not sure if Catherine is still around. Let's jump to you, Taylor. I was wondering, you're now a bit longer in the workforce than Filippo. How did you come about working in the field of sustainability, maybe also after your graduation? And yeah, why did you choose to specialize in this field?
Thanks so much. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
More higher, please.
Taylor, I'm currently working with the World Economic Forum and I've been working in the broader sustainability field since 2015, which now feels sort of like a long time ago. And so I spent a few years in that graduation, and then I've been with the World Economic Forum for the almost 5 years now. Sorry, I'm picking up on a lot of back.
Taylor? I think because I'm not sure, but we lose you in between talking. Is it? I'm not sure what the reason is, but maybe because of your earphones. Maybe if you try without them, it doesn't cut the connection.
1 second.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's still in though. Yeah. Because of the Bluetooth. No. Maybe put out your Bluetooth. Yeah. Taylor?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, way better, way better.
Okay, apologies. I think the AirPods were not cooperating today. Apologies for that. So I'll just start over because I'm not sure what everyone heard before. So my name's, I am picking up one request from my side. I am picking up on a lot of background noise in the room when I'm speaking. Can you mute when I'm speaking? Just otherwise I'm getting every movement and everything. This sounds really good, actually. Too good. Thanks. I think it's still the case, but I'll continue on. It's just picking up on a lot of it. So I'm Taylor. I graduated from the Institute in 2015. I did a master's in development studies, so I understood now there has been a merger kind of sense. So within MDev, as it was called, I did have a sustainability focus and really crafted my master's thesis around that topic as well. So I have been working at the World Economic Forum for the past almost 5 years, and prior to that, I was with UNEP. In both cases here in Geneva, and I apologize that I can't join you in person this week. I'm unfortunately not in Geneva this week, but normally that's where I'm at. So hope to have another opportunity to connect in person. But I was really interested in working in sustainability for a few different reasons. I think part of it really stems to kind of my childhood and where I grew up. And I grew up in a place that had really a lot of natural beauty and really remote mountains in the US. And I think even if I didn't realize it at the time, like this was quite a formative experience for me, just kind of having an appreciation for nature and outdoors. And that, I think, infiltrated into my professional interests as I developed. And then I think I also had quite a formative moment in my undergraduate years when I had taken a course that was on sustainability and the intersection with ethics and religion, which was quite a kind of novel topic, I would say. But I really felt like that was transformative in just kind of the way I viewed different environmental issues and the moral and ethical responsibility that we all have as human beings on this planet. To clean up our mess, essentially. And I really, that class and that course really changed the way I saw some of the environmental issues we're facing today. And so when I chose the Graduate Institute, I was also kind of looking for coursework that aligned with my interests. So took a variety of courses that supported my interest in the environment and have continued that trajectory ever since. So I hope that answers the question, and I'm happy to elaborate on that as we go on.
I hope you hear me again. Perfect. Thank you so much. That's super interesting. And then we go deeper into that as well, maybe later in the more specific questions. Marie-Claire, are you still here? I think you are.
Yes, I am, and I can see
Oh,
you.
hi. So good to see you. Or not.
You cannot see me?
You all, now you, well, no. It's really not on our side, technology today, it's incredible. We hear you, that all that matters. You have a rather unconventional kind of career path, and I think you all are still a student as well. I think you're doing everything, everywhere, all at once a bit. And I was wondering, did you have any expectations about your career actually in the first place? And then what was different from reality now that you're kind of also already living your career path and still studying? How did that come about, and where are you at the moment?
Thank you so much for the questions, and I'm so sorry that you can't see me because I can see Taylor very well, and I also can see the room. But yeah, anyways, also as Taylor, I'm normally live in Geneva, and I have to apologize for not being there in person. I'm currently in New York for a couple of conferences. That's why I cannot be with all of you. Yeah, I think Yannick, you kind of captured it correctly. It's very hard to put me in a box, but ultimately, I also think that is what is needed. That we need people who do things differently and explore new avenues. So for me, it was always very important to basically use what I learned in my studies and only apply it in the outside world. On one hand side, because it's really urgent and we don't have the time for finishing, all university and then all do a PhD and then start to care about, for example, the environment and the climate crisis. But also because I really thought that I have to use what the privilege I had, like what I learned in university, and apply this and give this back to the wider movement and to all the activities I'm doing. So in terms of if I ever had the aspiration for what I'm doing, in the sense of yes, I always wanted to work on the intersection of oh, now I think you can see me, right? Perfect. I always wanted to work on the intersection of people and planet, really supporting movements and working for a bigger cause around the climate crisis. So I knew this from a very young age onwards, when I saw how the natural world is changing, and especially how the Swiss glaciers are melting and dislining. And so it was very important for me to engage in this cause, which I'm doing. But then I was not, of course, not sure exactly where I'm ending up and that I'm engaging in the multilateral process, because also back then I didn't even know that something like this exists. And I think one of the biggest differences is that, many of these jobs, again, like I didn't even know that they're actually there or that you can actually even do them. And I think when you're in the field, suddenly you see like that they're actually very provided with different opportunities, also on a professional path. And I think that's why it's so important to start somewhere and not get intimidated by it. Because I think for a lot of grad students, or I mean also myself, like you're a young female in the workforce, it's sometimes very daunting and not really empowering, to sit around like a lot of older guys who have all like 30 years of experience in the field, and then you come in as a newcomer. But I think ultimately this is the way to go. That we also do things differently, and that we are courageous enough also to speak up in such situations, and that's what I'm doing. And I think it's really a great opportunity to be a student as well as already working, and I'm like an employer and an employee myself, so also like they kind of see both sides. Yeah, so this is a bit about me, and I hope I answered all your questions, Yannick. I'm looking forward.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we'll come back to some of the points that you mentioned right after in the next part. Catherine, I'm not sure if
You cannot open the camera.
she cannot open the camera, but she's here. That's perfect. I was wondering if there are any current trends in the field of sustainability that you think we need to pay attention to, especially because also you now worked for several years in this field. So maybe your insights on that question.
You should.
I think you should be unmuted and you could speak. I'm getting told. Maybe not. Catherine,
we updated your status as panelists, so you have to open your mic. Now you can.
Yeah.
Maybe she figures it out and we'll
She
just...
can't unmute herself.
Okay, and you cannot either?
No,
Okay.
she's up.
I'll hope you figure it out. Let's just move forward. Coming back to you, Filippo, you have experience in both the public and the private sector now, especially with Richemont. And I was wondering, what main differences do you see in your work in either sectors, and maybe also the approaches to sustainability that you see in the sectors, and how you also navigated through these differences?
Yeah, interesting question, especially because I think it's really like a work in progress, figuring out the career path. At least for me it is, and I'm sure it's gonna be like for a lot of people when you graduate and you're like, you know, like where do I want to work in? Do I want to work in a public organization? Do I want to work in a private organization? What interests me, etc. And I think actually my answer can also say something about what you were asking about the trends. I think something interesting that I'm seeing is that for issues and fields, now we call it field because we're talking about work and professional life, some things are really not exclusive. So one trend that I could see is that something like sustainability is really transversal in many other fields that people might be interested in and work that different organizations are doing. So when I think about like the public and the private, that one can see as like two very different things, and might think that there are a lot of differences in terms of like what they're doing and how to approach this. Actually, then when you get in, you realize that there's a lot of similarities, and it's not as different. I don't know if I'm clear on this point. Like, I actually see more similarities than differences. This is one point, but there are differences for sure. And for me, I was just to give a little bit more context. I was doing when I was at the institute. I did my internship at the UNICE here in Geneva, which was a very high level type of public work because it's really like in the palais. It's like, you know, that kind of, you know, political environment. And then now I'm working at Richemont, which is a private company in the luxury sector. So it's something really corporate, let's say. And I'm moving in to WEF next week or next month, which is kind of like in between the two things. I think, I mean, one difference that you can find is that, of course, if you're at the UN or any public institution, it has an explicit interest of non-profit and doing things for the purpose, let's say. Whereas in the private sector, for sure, you are doing things for profit. I mean, that's the nature of the organization. So it's kind of like the type of purpose that you want to be committed to. But then I also found situations the other way around. So like I was exposed to a lot of like ways of approaching this at the UN or, you know, in this sector, which was more because of the need and, you know, the need of the government and the need of the organization to exist. And it's something actually much more similar to how a corporate works and a business works, like the existence, the profit, and being there and doing those things. Whereas at Richemont, for example, likely I was in a team that was really, really committed, and I saw people that like were not working for that purpose, for the purpose of creating profit for the company, but to create like valuable projects that could make the business more sustainable. So it depends. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's you know, that there are two completely different ways of doing things and approaching this. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I can maybe stop now and see if like maybe they have something
We
to
can also come back.
yeah,
to it.
come
It's
back
really
to that.
interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Taylor, a question to you. You've been working on sustainability issues and most recently plastic pollution, various organizations. You've been wearing many hats, including the the WBCD, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the UN Environmental Programme, and now recently, or since a while, the World Economic Forum. I was wondering what skills, both soft and hard skills actually, helped you to navigate these positions in these organizations, and yeah, maybe you can elaborate a bit on your skill set and what helped you, and maybe also what you brought with you from the Institute.
Yeah, thanks. And I think this ties in nicely with what Filippo has just shared. So I think for the World Economic Forum, having kind of the business private sector orientation is really important because that's the kind of main stakeholder group. So I think I had a kind of an introduction to this through this lens at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and I did an internship there the summer after I finished my master's thesis, and so that was kind of the introduction. And I mean, I had written my master's thesis on a topic that was very much at the interface of kind of private sector, corporate social responsibility, and environment. Specifically, I was looking at the cocoa sector and sustainable sourcing practices. So I think carrying that. So in terms of what I brought from the institute, definitely like choosing a topic that I wanted to research that I felt could, give me advantage or give me an eye into the sector that I wanted to work in. So I think that's quite important. You can really use the thesis time as an opportunity to like, what are the skills and what's the knowledge you want to build that you want to bring into your career. So I think that's one thing. And I think, yeah, in terms of, I guess, hard skills and soft skills, I mean, I think the hard skills, the knowledge that you can build at the Institute is definitely super relevant. You need to understand kind of the economic, social, and environmental aspects of sustainability because one, sustainability is super broad, and two, it's quite all-encompassing. I mean, when we talk about sustainability, I think there is a strong environmental component, but it certainly doesn't stop there. And I think the Institute's kind of interdisciplinary approach to studies is really advantageous in that regard. And I think, yeah, understanding the policy environment, the regulatory environment, but also the business environment is key. And of course, you can take that different angles depending on what your interests are and which of those angles is most interesting to you. So those are, I guess, more of the hard skills or the content that I think is useful to develop. And then soft skills, there's so many. And a lot of these I felt, I maybe started building upon them at the Institute, but then really had the opportunity through experience to build on them further in the workplace. So basic things like organizational skills, project management skills, presentation skills are really important. So I think, having the opportunity to refine how you present in front of a group, that's important. And of course, now we're doing a lot through Zoom, but regardless, being able to speak well and share a narrative on your work is super important. I work with a lot of different kinds of stakeholders, a lot of different kinds of professionals, so business, government, civil society, and being able to, one, manage those stakeholders, manage those relationships, understand that each of these groups and each of these individuals has different motivations and different KPIs, and how to position your work accordingly. I think that's really important. And then, yeah, being able to communicate to them in different ways as well. And then another kind of foundational one, I guess, is time management and prioritization, which you can certainly learn through the Institute, juggling a busy course load. But in the workplace, that can look different, understanding what is really urgent and important and needs to happen now versus what can be postponed till later or deprioritized. And I think that's something that takes time. And over the years, you get better at that. It's still always a work in progress, but so I guess those are some of the top skills I would say that I've learned over the years and built upon during my time at the Institute as well.
That's great, and I hope that a lot of us also in our kind of current situation can use opportunities to learn at the Institute to kind of move forward with the job. I think a few of us here are currently writing the dissertation, and that's a great point that you're raising, that you can use that and leverage it for whatever you want to work in after.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I'm told that Catherine is now with us. I'm so sorry that this took so long, and I'm so happy that finally we hopefully can hear you. Catherine, I was wondering, so you're currently, wait, first let's check, otherwise I read a whole lot of question. Can you hear us and can you talk to us? Can you unmute yourself?
Hello, I can hear you, but not too clearly. If you could speak up a bit.
Okay, I'll try. So glad that you can hear us, first of all. I hope you can hear me better now. Catherine, you're currently working with the UNDP, and amongst different projects, you're currently coordinating activities of the Ghana Waste Recovery Platform, which is super interesting, and a platform that is supporting Ghana's efforts in actually transitioning to a circular economy. Could you tell us a bit more, well, very, very briefly, I think most of us maybe have heard of circular economy, but maybe the different career opportunities in that field, because I feel like it's an emerging field in the broader area of sustainability, and your work in particular. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you for having me on this panel. So basically, the circular economy, when we talk about the circular economy, we are talking about an economic model, and as you rightly said, it's an emerging model. And it's mainly based on sharing, leasing, reuse, repair, and refurbishment. So we are looking at recycling. And in this system, what we are really looking at is to close the loop and to reduce waste in the system. So we want to reduce the amount of waste that goes to landfills and make use of every resource that we have. And then when we speak about transitioning towards a circular economy, it means that we want to move away from the previous method, the previous economic module, where we take, we make, we dispose. We want to be able to make use of every resource and reduce the waste in the environment. So I'll talk briefly about what I do with UNDP in working with the government to helping the country to transition towards a circular economy. So I coordinate activities on the waste recovery platform. This platform is a multi-stakeholder platform made up of a number of stakeholders, both from the formal sector, informal sector. We have those from the educational system, universities. We have private sector, we have NGOs, development partners. So they came together in about 2018, whilst the country was deliberating on how to transition. UNDP took the initiative, brought together all stakeholders in the value chain, particularly in the plastic value chain, to look at ways in which we could manage waste in the country. So what a platform actually does, it provides a platform. It's providing a platform to bring together all these various stakeholders. And we do this by having physical meetings where we have discussions on things that we could do to looking at policy gaps, coming up with new methods and ways of how we could reduce, recycle. The platform also has a digital aspect to it, where we have a map, a waste resource map, to guide people to know where to go to recycle, as well as trying to facilitate interaction between the various stakeholders. We also support businesses by providing them with both technical assistance, financial assistance, especially startups in the circular, those doing things in waste recovery. And then we also have the communication dimension, where we bring together trying to support in area of behavioral change. So we come up with videos, we do some work on publicity work to support the country in that area. As this is an emerging and new field, there are lots of opportunities there. And I would even start with what I'm doing right now, which is the program analyst. you get the opportunity to work on several projects that has to do with sustainability. Then you could also work as an environmental. So at this point, I'm just talking about the formal, what we could do at the formal level. You could be an environmental policy advisor with an organization where you advise the organization on how to go about their activities, on green policies. You could also be a data analyst, sustainability data analyst. So for those who are more inclined in data collection, and then if you have research skills, it's also very useful because in whichever field you find yourself, you need that as well. And then we also have the product life cycle managers who actually would then be more interested in looking at the products, looking at new type of products, ways in which we could produce things to make them more sustainable, looking at packaging, designing, and all that. So these are some few things I could mention, or some few areas that I think you could venture into if you decide to work in the circular economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really, really insightful. And I hope we come back to you again, because you weren't able to speak a whole lot until now, but also being a bit aware of time. I move forward to one final question to you, Marie-Claire, and then I open the floor for questions from the audience. And I do have a lot of backup questions if we have a bit more time after. Marie-Claire, you were mentioning before the fact that you're working in this field, which now also you're in New York, which I think is for which, you can also tell us for which organization you're in New York, actually. But I was wondering, given your young age and just generally, you mentioned being around people with 30 plus years of experience, which can be daunting, I think, to some of us maybe, and also kind of where to find your place in this world. I was wondering, how would you advise or recommend young people to leverage their voice in this kind of field that is often dominated by people with more experience, or also male for you as a woman? If you have some insights on that, how we as kind of young graduates can find our voice there, and also how to kind of venture in this field.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was more of a, it was not that I kind of planned to end up in the multilateral space, but it was basically a lot of different coincidences which led me to stick around the space. Because the first conference, multilateral conference I ever attended was the World Climate Conference in 2017, and I had a lot of support by the NGO. I was there going as an advocate activist from an NGO, a Swiss-based NGO. And I got a lot of training and support, and then I was like, okay, I read all the documents, I'm going there and I will deliver what I have to say, and then everything will change and I will be super delighted about my participation. But it was the opposite. I didn't really understand what was going on. I felt really lost. I couldn't really see what my purpose was in this space. And I actually was about to, okay, this was once in a lifetime, and it's just not my space, and I will not come back. And then a couple of friends kind of kept me in the space, and this is how it how I kind of sticked around, and also led to my participation now in New York, where I'm attending the Global Future Forum, which is the civil society part of the Summit of the Future, which you might have heard about, which will happen next year. As the Secretary General Antonio Guterres announced, it focused mainly about the reforms of the UN, that the UN will be fit for purpose. So let's see what's coming out there. As well as I'm attending currently the UN Water Conference. It's a once in a generation opportunity, because the last conference was before we were all born, back in the 70s. And of course, water is a very crucial and important topic. But talking more about the inequalities you highlighted, and I think it's very important to be aware of the inequalities and don't try to just I mean, if you're aware that they have like 30 years of experience, it feels already a little bit less daunting than if you go in and think you have to be exactly the same as they are. But what I actually realized when I became a negotiator for Switzerland, I was in fact the youngest ever negotiator for the government of Switzerland in 2019, that actually they are equally lost sometimes than I am, right? And very often we don't recognize them because they walk around like in the suits, they have like all the documents, they sit on the table and deliver some speeches. And then I always said, okay, they know everything. And then when I was sitting on the table and was negotiating, I was like, okay, which document are we looking at? Can you please explain me what the difference in this text, for example, means? When I was negotiating, they were equally questioning certain parts, and also they didn't really know what was going on. So I think this is also an important thing to keep in mind, that maybe we also, or actually very often, we underestimate our own position or values, and we overestimate the others. And I think in general, it's very important to really know what is going on. When we talk about the intergeneration, when we talk about the negotiations, I think it's very important to really understand what is the subject about, really have an in-depth understanding of the negotiation skill, the dynamics, and it's really, really complex. But I think if we understand this and if we prepare ourselves very well, then we should not hold back to, for example, deliver an intervention or really intervene and be proactive, but also then use the opportunity for having more informal conversations, and then also pick it up there as well. So I think there are kind of a couple of different settings we as young people should explore. But again, I think the first conference is very daunting and very challenging. That's why it's good to have a network as well. And that's also what I'm currently working on. I work for the Youth Negotiators Academy, which is an academy I co-founded last year to train young negotiators and diplomats, mainly now for the UN Climate Conference, and next year also for the biodiversity and desertification conventions. And it's supporting countries and basically bringing in new people and training them as well for these negotiations, to support them that they're not as lost as I was when I started my first negotiations. And I think, you know, like for all of you, I mean, you have all the expertise now in your own field. I think it's important that we speak up, and maybe even that maybe we fail at one point, and that's completely fine. Maybe we didn't deliver the intervention at the right moment, but I think it's important to start somewhere and not hold ourselves back, because we're really running out of time, and there is no time that we can have like acquire 30 years of experience for then speaking up. And ultimately also, I do think that intergenerational leadership is very crucial in these settings. That's why it's so important that we are all listening to other generations, but also that we bring in our points. So I really encourage all of you to speak up when you're in a setting where you feel you can contribute, and especially also for younger women, that we are also able to speak up, and don't feel that we are not allowed to say anything because there are a lot of older men in the room.
Thank you very much. That's very reassuring to hear that all the others are equally lost sometimes. Thank you very much. That was really insightful as well. I think we can now open the floor for questions. You can raise your hand, quickly say your name and also to whom or to multiple people if you're addressing the question. This way we already know. And I think we take maybe one or two right now, we get the answers, and then we do another round. I take these two questions. Yes, first you and
Hi, my name is Arno. I'm in the final semester of a Master's of International Affairs, focusing on environment and specifically circular economy. So my question is for Taylor, and I would be curious about how you kind of built the journey within the web over the last couple of years, because I think what I often see with young professionals, also in the sustainability space, is that you often switch from organization to organization. It's kind of hard to stay in one organization for a longer time and increase your impact and your responsibility over time. So I wonder if you have any recommendations on that.
Thank you very much. I think we take the other question and then we come to the answers. Yes.
My question is for Marie-Claire. With this side, I'm pursuing the new MINT program in environmental sustainability. So since Marie-Claire has experience as a youth negotiator, youth delegate for climate negotiations, I wanted to know how meaningful you find contribution of the youth in such events like COP or One Climate Conference. Like, is it just about like participation of youth for the namesake, or is youth actually able to make some meaningful contribution to the actual negotiations which happen?
Thank you so much. So first Taylor and then Marie-Claire.
Thanks for the question. I think it's a great one, actually, because it's not easy. It hasn't always been easy. But it's also an excellent point of people jumping from organization to organization. And I think there's different drivers for that. I think oftentimes it's contract instability, especially in Geneva, but probably other places as well. But this is one that I'm quite familiar with, at least in the UN system, kind of not having, that security and kind of needing to, find a new job after 6 months or 9 months or 18 months, etc. I think I've been pretty fortunate at the World Economic Forum. The contractual situation is generally a bit easier and a bit more stable than some of the UN agencies. So I think that's been really advantageous to just give me the security I need as a non-European citizen, particularly with permits and visas and everything, which, I mean, we have to factor this in. It's a real consideration for a lot of us who are trying to work in the sustainability field in Geneva. So I guess one thing I've really appreciated at the WEF is internal mobility possibilities. I mean, once you're in an organization, it's definitely easier to move internally. And compared to other places I've worked, the World Economic Forum definitely offers that. I mean, it's never super easy, but absolutely that possibility exists. And many colleagues who have been there for several years have worked in several different roles. So I started out in a role that was kind of a central function, working across a breadth of different sustainability topics. And I got that role because a former UNEP colleague was at the World Economic Forum and basically had reached out to me and said, we're looking to recruit someone with your profile. Are you interested? So I think I got very fortunate. And I think a lot of job searching is all about, time and the right moment, right time, a bit of luck. Of course, there's so many factors, but that always plays a role. So that's what basically helps me to enter the organization. I think to stay in the organization, I moved roles internally kind of at the height of the pandemic in 2020, when a lot of things were shifting and a lot of us were having a very challenging time in March 2020. And so the team I was on was really struggling with different factors from the pandemic and no longer having physical events and so forth. And so I was looking for internal mobility, and I kind of took it upon myself and was really proactive in setting up coffee meetings with different managers and different teams internally, and just sharing, like, I'm interested in your work, I'd love to learn more, and making it clear that I'd be interested in different possibilities if they were to arise now or in the future. And so I had different conversations like that. And again, I think with a bit of positioning and luck and timing, it worked out that I could move onto the same team I'm still on now. So it's been almost 3 years. And so, I think you have to be kind of proactive, put yourself out there a little bit, and also just hope for a little bit of luck to have the right doors open internally when you need them to.
Thank you so much, Marie-Claire.
Yeah, thanks for the great question. And maybe just to start with, I don't think that, there is not like one single meaningful engagement. If you're, for example, a very outspoken minister, you can actually achieve a lot of change. If you're an outspoken activist and they maybe make a direct action in front of a negotiation hall, you can really change the course, and we have seen this. On the other hand, also as a young negotiator, you can come in and maybe ask a question at the right moment, which actually like one of our trained young negotiators asked a question in the negotiations around adaptation and left the room silent for a couple of seconds because it was really on spot. So there are a whole range of meaningful engagement in multilateral negotiation spaces. And there's also a whole range of very tokenistic youth engagement, or just in general engagement, not only youth engagement. This is like the same with indigenous people. This is the same for any other group who is not in a position of power. And we already talked about the powerful positions prior. So with this is also how we structured the academy, that we developed the curriculum, which is around 100 hours of learning, really the soft skills, the hard skills, really understanding the space, but also how do you actually engage with the space, with the meaning that they are actually afterwards leading their negotiation fields. We build a community also, they do not feel alone, then integrate them in the wider network. And I think these elements, we also fund the young negotiators if the country is unable to fund. We also work on a lot of advocacy events to really champion intergenerational leadership and solidarity in decision making. So we try to create an ecosystem of change where young people then can meaningfully engage in the space. If you only have like 1 or 2 young people in the space, it's very, very hard. When I was a negotiator, I was the only young person in the room. I mean, there were other also rather young people in comparison, but rather young is then maybe 35. But when you are 23 to 35, of course, it's a huge gap. And when you're alone there, of course, you're very vulnerable to the power dynamics. So it's very important to also build these support structures to then create a meaningful engagement. I think it's also very important that we as young people are really demanding to have a seat at the decision-making table and not only advising the ones who take the decisions, because ultimately young people are more than half of the world's population, and I do really strongly believe that young people are capable, are knowledgeable, but also are able to make these changes in an intergenerational way for themselves, and are able to speak up where it actually matters, and are not only here in a position to support others to then take the decisions, and very often then dilute the words of young people or change them or actually don't understand them correctly. So there are multiple ways of how you can engage in this space, but we definitely have seen an increase of meaningful youth engagement, and we also have seen an increase of tokenistic youth engagement. And basically, you can easily distinguish in the sense of, is the key message of what the person has said actually being translated into further action or not. So if there is, for example, Indigenous people are just invited to sing in front of the whole, negotiation hall, but they're not able to speak and actually tell us what they would like to see, then it can be very, very tokenistic. Or if young people are just there to advice, but then the person is not taking their inputs forward, then it's tokenistic. But again, like for example, young people can make advices, and actually the person, then for example, the president makes a huge speech and actually brings forward exactly these words and what the young people told the person, then it can be very meaningful. So I think it's a very thin line, but it's definitely important to have more young voices and more diverse voices in decision making, and not only in multilateral space, but everywhere.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marie-Claire, for this. And I think we're running a bit over time. I hope that it's okay for you. I take 2 more questions from the audience, and I quickly give the floor at the end to Filippo and Catherine also. Yes. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to all the panelists for being here. My name is Celine, and I'm currently a second semester, yeah. It feels like 2 years. I study economics in my first year right now. And so my question is more directed towards Taylor as well, because you have experience in both the UN system as well as sort of the interlink between business and international organizations. And so my question is, what are your thoughts or advice for young graduates in choosing the type of organization to be involved with? That being, for example, a company, an NGO, or a public organization. So I actually did an internship with the UNEP as well, and it was very insightful. I really much enjoyed it, but I'm not sure if it allows for the learning opportunities one might seek in the beginning, early stages of the career. So given your experience, what are your thoughts on that? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Celine. Is there any other questions we have?
Yes, more for Catherine. So my dream job is actually to work at the UNDP and kind of do what you want to do, what you do. And I would like to know how did you go about it to enter the UNDP, and especially if you work in outside of Europe on the ground, which is what I would like to do. Did you have previous experience in other kind of NGOs or on projects on the ground for this, and was it useful to enter, or do they also employ people who have worked mostly in Europe for these kind of jobs?
Thank you very much. Okay, and we can... Yes.
Yeah, it's very good. No, just generally, thanks to all the panelists. My name is Jonas. I have more of a personal question, because what always interests me is also how do people who have such international careers as you have kind of manage the work-life thing, and how do you manage your family? How do you kind of keep these relations going, knowing that you are in different places, moving between different contexts? Thank you.
So, a great question. Yeah. I wonder myself sometimes. We can, I think so. In the being aware of time, I think if the answers to the questions, I know this is always the hardest part, but could be relatively short, that would be fantastic. But please, so we go forward with the question for Taylor, then for you, Catherine, and then we open the last question up to a bit of like everybody for a short final kind of statement as well, and then we close it up. I hope that's fine for everybody. Okay, wonderful. Taylor.
Thanks, and I'll try to be concise and short. Great question on kind of what I understood was, what type of organization, where can you make the most impact, where can you gain the most skills, where can you move the needle? And I think that's a really personal question, so it looks really different for everyone. And I think I'm still on that journey. So I think it's something that, you can try working in a company or working for the UN after graduation for a few years, and then, decide that was a good learning experience, but it's not where I feel like I'm learning the most or where I feel like I can have the most impact, right? So I think we're all still on that journey, maybe. But I think it's great if you had that experience at UNEP as an intern, and maybe feeling like that's not where you can gain the most. So I would encourage you to explore other opportunities, whether through internships or when applying to jobs after graduation. Like maybe look for startup organizations or private sector or other kinds of organizations that are maybe a bit more dynamic than UNEP could be. So I'll leave it at that given time.
Thank you so much. Catherine. Catherine? Can you hear us, Catherine? Catherine? I think she can. No one? Hello. Hi.
Sorry, I couldn't.
No
I
worries.
can hear you really clearly.
Okay, wonderful. She can't. Not wonderful. Sorry. I don't know why.
Did you hear my question, Catherine, or?
You have to repeat it.
The question again, please.
The question again, it was how did you start working at the UNDP, and do you think that previous experience on the field is necessary, or can you?
Were you able to hear the question?
No, sorry, I didn't.
Okay, so I repeat.
If you type it out for me, that would also be that would be great.
The question is, how did you start with the UNDP, and is it necessary to have prior experience, quote unquote, on the field if you want to work in that kind of area? That was the question that was asked.
So can I take it? So it's a question about whether it's important to have field work experience.
Exactly, if you want to work in this area after graduating, for example.
Oh yeah. Okay, so that's an interesting question. Because I started when I started, I did. Let's say I didn't take a track in sustainability in school, but it was through an internship that I had more experience in that area because I was doing research for a fellow in an organization in Geneva. And so it gave me the exposure to more issues on sustainability. So I wouldn't say that having the fieldwork is like key, but it was also useful, especially when you come into the professional space. If you have that, it sometimes propels you, it makes you understand things a little bit more. And the exposure, the interaction with people, the exposure, let's say all those things work out to make you understand what you're working on more. But again, it's not, I don't think it's key to you working in the sustainability field, because as we speak now, there are lots of learning opportunities. You could go online to read things for yourself. You could network with others to learn a lot more. So even though it's useful, it's not the most important thing to move into the sustainability field.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. So we have, I would say, 3 more minutes. I just wanted to ask Filippo, you also had something to say about internal mobility, and if you could answer that question or give your thoughts on that, and then we just close it up with the final question about kind of the work-life balance.
All right. No, I just want to build on what Taylor was saying, because, I mean, I think, and also to answer the question, I don't remember your name, but your question, because I think my perspective now is really kind of more similar to that of the students that of people that have worked for a few years, because I'm coming from that, like it's been a few months actually, And I think that is a problem that exists. Like, how do you stay and how do you make sure, you know, like that you can, you can have internal mobility in organizations, or like how do you also relate it to how do you choose the organizations when you have to switch or when you want to switch. And I think like one thing is what Taylor was saying, like a bit of exposure for yourself and lack of finding the doors open when you need them. But I just want to stress the exposure part, because it's really like you can let the door open at any time by leveraging the resources that you have. So for example, like, I mean, I wouldn't say that if you need to leave a place, it's good to live. If you don't want to leave the place where you are, it's good to do so, but it can become an opportunity for you to connect through where you were to other places. And I think an important thing that I wanted to stress is also like, don't be too focused on one thing, because I was starting from there, like that was my approach before. I thought I knew what I wanted, and I just wanted like, you know, one direct path to not lose any time and just go there. And then I had many conversations with people, and one in particular with my capstone partner actually, that really enlightened me and said, like, this is the time for you to discover different things and try different things. And once I changed the approach, everything changed, and I found out that I didn't know what I wanted. I still don't know, and Taylor was also saying like it's a work in progress, and it really is. So it's not, I mean, yes, it is a problem, and especially in Geneva, someone also mentioned this, especially here, it's really complicated to start. It's much better to come back when you have your 10 years of experience and everyone wants you, and you stay here for another 5 and then you leave, because I think 30% of the people here, there was a statistic of the people in Geneva don't live here for more than like a few years. But yeah, get that exposure and talk to people, and this is something that, like, I mean, I have a very long list of tips, but just wanted to build on that, saying that, you know, it's part of it, and it's not necessarily bad, but it is a problem that exists. Yes.
Thank you very much.
And on the family part, 1 second, and then we can wrap up. But it's very personal, as you said, but it's personal in the sense that it's also touching me now, because I'm starting to have this problem. Like, you know, when I think it's also related to Geneva not having the possibility to offer things that people want to everyone, especially non-Europeans. But it is something that you know, it's part of the game, let's say. But with the interdisciplinary, let's call it like this, but like with the more general perspective that we get at the Institute, I think you're easily adaptable in different fields and places. And as I was saying, sustainability is really transversal, so it's also relatively easy, or let's put it like this, easier for us than for other people to have that mobility also internationally, not only within the same place. But yeah, I mean, at the personal level, then it's choice, and it's really.
Thank you very much, and we will also have you for a quick discussion after this in person for everybody who wants to stay. I just go, yeah, maybe not.
For a while, yes.
For a minute. I'll just give this question to Taylor, and then to Marie-Claire, and then to Catherine at the end about the work-life balance, maybe just 1 or 2 thoughts on it to wrap up. Thank you.
Sure. I think this is also one of those questions that you have to figure out on your journey. What's important to you and how to prioritize. It's not easy. I think if you've chosen an international career, you know, you can't have it all. I think I don't want to say that you can. You know, I've been in Geneva almost 10 years and have built my career here, but I've missed friends' weddings. I've missed babies being born. I've missed that stuff. And I've also gone back home for a lot of that. So I've been able to do some of it, but not all of it. And I think that's just something you have to be okay with and find peace with yourself. And then, you know, when you do get a chance to go on a work trip and it's close to home, you make the trip to see friends, and you kind of, take advantage of that international career. But it's hard.
Yeah, maybe to follow up on Taylor, I think the system is not yet ready to support, for example, also young parents, or also, it's not a system which is yet supportive. Also, for example, in the negotiations, when there's a mother with a young child, there is no room and they have just to go like somewhere to the toilet. So it's like really not fit for purpose, but it's also something we can call out and suggest further improvement. And I think that, as you mentioned also, Taylor, you also adapt kind of your friend circle. So you kind of naturally are in a very international friend circle, which is also beautiful because, at least to me, when I'm reading news, you know, you feel really close to what is happening all around the world, and it makes it also way more personal. Nevertheless, I think there is much more to improve.
Thank you very much. And you, Catherine, the question was, I just repeated. Or have
Yes,
you heard?
so I think it's important usually to have a work-life balance, but there are periods like when you work where things really get intense, and then you definitely would not be able to get that balance. But usually I would try not to feel guilty at such times and just get into the work and do what I have to do. Then when you have the time, you try to create a balance. So it's like Taylor said, it's really more of a personal thing. And as and when, as you go along, you know what to do, depending on your workload and the time and the timelines involved, deliverables and all that. You'll find a balance somewhere. But it's important to make time to have time with friends and family.
Like everything else, it's also a work in progress. Thank you very much to all of you for being here, for bearing with us for the first few moments with the technical difficulties. But I think it was really, really insightful, and we really appreciate that you made it for the call and for the roundtable. Thank you very much, Taylor, Marika, Catherine.
I would add thank you to Yannick for moderating very well.